What is going on, guys? This is DropThisBox, and I hope all of you guys out there are having a fantastic day today. And today I want to talk about Dave the Barbarian, which was another cartoon that I used to watch on Disney Channel all of those years ago. And when it comes to Dave the Barbarian, it was definitely a fun show for its time. It's a show I could think about now today and be like, yeah, I definitely had my fun with this show all those years ago. The show didn't last super long, but it still gave me some moments as a kid that I can look back at and be like, yeah, you know, this show was funny. It had a couple moments here and there. And that's exactly what I want to do within this video. I just want to break down Dave the Barbarian, what it's all about, and what it really provided us when it was airing all of those years ago. So let's dive right into that conversation because it should be a fun one when we discuss Dave the Barbarian today. So when you think about Barbarian themed shows, you probably imagine something intense, action-packed, and full of epic battles. But Dave the Barbarian flipped that expectation on its head by turning the entire concept into a goofy, self-aware comedy. Instead of a fierce warrior leading daring adventures, we got Dave, a giant muscular guy who was more afraid of germs than combat. And it was a fun twist that made the show stand out, especially in an era when cartoons were starting to experiment more of humor and genre parodies. What made this unique take work was how well it leaned into the absurdity of the setting. The medieval fantasy world was still there because we had castles, dragons, sorcerers, but the way the show played with these tropes was what made it entertaining. Instead of being a fearless knight, Dave was a reluctant hero who preferred baking over sword fighting. His companions, like his warrior-minded sister Fang and the sarcastic talking sword Lula, balanced out his cowardly nature and added to the comedic dynamic. The self-awareness made Dave the Barbarian a breath of fresh air. The show constantly poked fun at fantasy cliches, breaking the fourth wall, and exaggerating classic adventure tropes to ridiculous levels. It was kind of like a mix of Monty Python and The Emperor's New Groove, a style of humor that felt ahead of its time but still managed to resonate with kids back then. If you like shows that didn't take themselves seriously, this one was definitely the perfect fit for you. And although it didn't last long, it still had a solid identity. The whole idea of a reluctant, soft-hearted hero in a setting that typically glorifies strength and bravery was a fun concept that worked well for the early 2000s. It played into the kind of humor that was getting popular at the time, sarcastic, fast-paced, and filled with pop culture references. In a way, Dave the Barbarian took what worked in older fantasy cartoons and completely flipped it, making it feel fresh and exciting. One of the best things about Dave the Barbarian, again, was its humor, because the show didn't just rely on funny dialogue or physical comedy. It thrived on ridiculous, over-the-top gags that made no sense but somehow worked. Whether it was a villain turning into a cow, an evil potato enslaving the kingdom, or Dave's extreme fear of dirty surfaces, the randomness of it kept things unpredictable and hilarious. Comedy often broke the fourth wall, which was something not every cartoon did at the time. The narrator, voiced by Jeff Bennett, was constantly commenting on the plot, making sarcastic remarks, or even interacting with the characters. It gave the show a unique charm, almost like the writers were letting the audience in on the joke. This kind of humor made Dave the Barbarian feel different from a lot of other animated series around its time, which were more straightforward in their storytelling. Another thing that made the humor work was how it played with expectations. You'd think a Barbarian show would be all about the action and heroism, but Dave was constantly running away from danger, whining about small inconveniences, or being pushed into battles he wanted nothing to do with. The contrast between what he should have been and what he actually was made for some of the show's funniest moments. This type of humor might have not worked for everyone, but for those who liked absurd, unpredictable comedy, it was golden. I feel like Dave the Barbarian didn't care about following any traditional storytelling rules. He just wanted to make people laugh, and that's exactly what it did. A big part of what made Dave the Barbarian so fun was its cast of characters. Every member of the main group had their own quirks that added to the humor. Dave himself was the giant, strong-looking guy who acted like the world's biggest wimp. Then you had Fang, his tough-as-nails little sister, who was more barbarian-like than he was. Their contrast alone made for some great comedy. Then there was Candy, their fashion-obsessed older sister, who was technically in charge but spent more time worrying about her wardrobe than ruling the kingdom. The idea of a teenage girl running a medieval land while prioritizing fashion over leadership was already funny, but the way the show leaned into it made her character even better. And of course, you can't forget Lula, the talking enhanced sword, who is probably the most sarcastic character of the bunch. She always had something snarky to say, and her constant annoyance when Dave was being a coward made for some great comedic moments. Even the side characters and villains were entertaining. Whether it was Chuckles, the silly piggy, a villain with the least threatening name ever, the show always found ways to make its antagonists just as ridiculous as the heroes. There was never a dull moment because the characters were always doing something wacky or unexpected. The strong character dynamics are what made the show so fun to watch. Every interaction felt exaggerated in the best way, and the different personalities balance each other out perfectly, and without this oddball cast, the humor wouldn't have landed nearly as well. And for all its strengths, Dave the Barbarian didn't last very long. It only ran for one season before disappearing, which is a shame because it had so much potential. Part of the reason for this was probably its timing. Disney Channel was shifting its focus towards live action shows, and cartoons like this weren't getting as much attention as they used to. Another issue might have been that its humor was pretty niche, and not everyone was into its weird over-the-top style, and some might have not understood the constant fourth wall breaking and parody elements. It definitely wasn't your typical Saturday morning cartoon that might have been worked against it when it came to reaching a bigger audience. But even though it didn't last long, it still holds up today. The humor, the characters, and the unique take on the barbarian genre made it fun to revisit. If anything, it feels even more ahead of its time now, especially with modern cartoons embracing more self-aware and absurd humor. Shows like Gumball, for example, had a similar comedic style, proving that Dave the Barbarian was onto something before it became the norm. So while it may have not stuck around as long as other Disney cartoons, Dave the Barbarian still left an impact. It was fun, ridiculous, and completely unlike anything else around its time. And for those of us who watched it, it's one of those shows that remained a nostalgic gem, even if it was short-lived. So I'm glad I was able to get my thoughts out on Dave the Barbarian today, because like I said, it was a fun show for its time. It did what it needed to do. It didn't need to be like overly complicated or have this big plot line built from the very beginning leading to the end of the series. Obviously, it didn't last long like I discussed, but it just did its job, because as a kid, you know, you're watching these cartoons to be entertained, get a good laugh here and there, and just to have a memorable experience overall. And I was able to get that when I was watching Dave the Barbarian all of those years ago, and that's honestly all that mattered to me at the end of the day. But now I'm gonna leave the ball in your court. How do you guys feel about Dave the Barbarian? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Is there any memories that you guys want to share with me when it comes to Dave the Barbarian? Be sure to let me know down below. And if you enjoy the content on this channel, be sure to like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. If you guys want to follow me on my social media, be sure to check out my X, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. All the links to those are located in the description below. Be sure to click on that bell for notifications so you guys are notified whenever I'm dropping a video on the channel. But other than that, I hope all of you guys are having a fantastic day, wherever the day may be, if it's the daytime, the nighttime, or the evening. And I'll see you guys in the next video. As always, peace out.